Noon. You get my point? Number one, there were no system of dots to distinguish letters. Secondly, there was nothing which is called diacritical remarks. You know, sometimes you get marks on the Quran, like this is fatha, kasra, hamza, shadda, the various ways which would make a difference in utterance. But what I'm saying here, that the Western scholars try to project something which is suitable only for their scriptures and require that that must be done also in the case of the Quran. Whereas, like I say, even if somebody tell you, okay, I can produce, this is impossible, but suppose somebody, I can produce you the entire Quran that was written at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it would have not been enough to preserve it. Because you don't know how to pronounce it. B, ba, ta, tha, jim, ha, kha, also is contingent on the dots. What preserved the Quran, what is unique into it, is memorization. And it's only through memorization and through the early people who were really fit, that was their language, that was their bread and butter, that you know exactly how the ayah should be recited. But in addition to this, we must say that even if you come to the notion of memorization, which some people find it impossible, how could you depend on memory of people to preserve over 6,200 ayahs in the Quran? We notice, first of all, number one, that while writing was known among Arabs, and after Islam and the writing of the Quran, of course, it became more widespread than before. While writing was known, the majority of Arabs depended on memory, before Islam even, to memorize or preserve their lineage. They depended on memory. History, they depended on memory. Poetry. There's one story, whether it's correct or exaggerated, but it's quite revealing of the strange ability of people to memorize. It says that someone went to his friend, he was a poet, and he told him, look, I got a brand new long poem of 100 verses. Of course, that's a great deal of source of pride. So he said, all right, recite it to me. So he started going on through the 100 verses. And the man, his friend, said, oh, you're telling me this is new? He said, yes, I just finished it. He said, no, it's not new. I heard it before. He said, I challenge you. So he went reciting the exact 100 verses as they are. He said, no, it's not new. He said, I can't believe it. He said, no, it's so common. He called his wife behind the curtain and he said, did you hear about the poem about such and such? He said, yes. He said, what does it say? And she went exactly through the 100 verses. The man got mad. He said, oh, I can get you. My servant, he heard it by now 3 times, and he recited all of them. Of course, like I said, regardless of authenticity of the story, but it at least carries some essence of the amazing ability of the early Arab. Of course, their obsession with poems and beautiful expression. And when the Quran came to challenge all that eloquence, obviously, it really captured their attention very immensely. Number 2, the Quran was not like other scriptures. If you look into the comparative religious aspect of it, you find, for example, that the Torah was largely available to the rabbis and the doctors of law. You know, they teach the public, but they are the ones really who keep, you know, the law in their hands. If you look at the history of Christendom, for example, you find that even when the Bible was put into writing, usually manuscripts were only available in the hands of the scholars, the priests, the clergy. And as you know, especially in the Catholic, among Catholics until relatively recently, it was not regarded as appropriate for a common Christian, for example, to read the Bible on his own, because they said he could get confused or get the wrong message. So he just goes to church, sit, listen to the priest, making selection and teaching them what to say. It was, of course, as you know, Martin Luther who raised this issue that every Christian should have access to the Bible. It should not be a monopoly of the learned or the priests. But we talk about centuries after that. But the case of the Quran was quite different. The Quran was revealed not in secret, not with a few select companions of the Prophet ﷺ, but wherever he was, traveling, sitting in the battlefield, and everybody's present in the masjid, and everybody's hearing and watching what's taking place. But more importantly, that it became a religious duty on Muslims and a praiseworthy act to memorize the Qur'an. And you go to Bukhari, for example, when we talk about Fada'il al-Qur'an, a whole chapter on the virtues of the Qur'an, and other books of hadith, and see the amount of ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ encouraged people to learn the Qur'an, to teach it to their children, to have their children memorize it. Some of you might remember one of the famous hadith, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. Very eloquent. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best of you is one, he or she, is the one who learns the Qur'an and teach it to others. So that was a source of immense encouragement for all people. Thirdly, and still, in spite of all that you say, some people still in the Western frame of mind say, how could anyone memorize that whole book? Even at the time of the Prophet. And what they forget, that the Qur'an was revealed in piecemeal over a period of nearly 23 years, a little here and little there. And that makes it a lot easier to memorize than saying, all right, take that whole book, memorize it, and come to tell me in 2 hours. It was all period. Whole period for. Fourthly, unlike the Hebraic law or the Torah or the teaching of the New Testament, which was used, yes, but not really anything that comes closer to the constant use of the Quran in the daily life of the Muslim. The Muslim pray 5 times a day. And there is always not only the Fatiha, the opening surah of the Quran, there is encouragement of reading beyond that. And of course, they were not like us today, rushing, Al-Fatiha, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu Akbar, Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq, Allahu Akbar. These people used to pray in much longer and elaborate way than most of us are doing today. You find some ahadith, even that in the same rak'ah, you finish Surah Al-Baqarah and go even beyond. How many of us even can take that? Anyway, so the Quran was recited every day in prayer, in required prayer. It was recited in nafil prayer, in sunnah, encouraged, or non-mandatory prayers. And then we find lots of evidence in sound ahadith in the variety of hadith book that it was the custom of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ to recite the Quran at night. Some spend most of the night reciting the Quran. Look at the significance and implication of this hadith. When the Prophet ﷺ forbade that you should finish the Quran in less than 3 days. Suppose even that statement came earlier when the Quran was not completed. Still, it indicates that some people were doing it. That he said, take it easy, not less than 3 days. But again, it encouraged to be, not much more than 7 days. And now, when people finish the Quran in 1 month or 2, they think that they are really doing a good job. So the constant use of it. But the use of the Quran also was not only for prayer or worship or recitation at night or teaching. More importantly, it was for learning how to apply it to their lives. So whenever there was a dispute or problem, and you find that still in books of jurisprudence until today, it says, no, you should not do that, or you should do that, and the evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and then he quotes the ayah from the Quran. It was a reference book for all phases and aspects of the life of the community. But finally, that is something that shocks a lot of people when they know about it. When you tell them, very simple statement, tell them today, in the 20th century, in spite of the loss of the eloquence that reached its epic at the time of the Prophet and Sahaba, in spite of the weakness of the memory, we depend on anything now. Some of you who have kids in the school, these calculators? If you ask them if he doesn't have calculator, add up 22 and 29, it might take them half an hour. Say, give me a calculator. So the memory today has been spoiled with the availability of all this stuff that we have. It might get even weaker. In spite of that big lag, you can find today, not adults, children as young as 9 or 10